It started with a kiss. The back row of the classroom. How could I resist the aroma of your perfume?
My name's Wendy Ide. I'm going to be hosting this BAFTA Q&A with the producers of LIMBO, Irune Gurtubai and Angus Lamont. So I think before we get into the actual sort of production of the film, can we talk a little bit about the genesis of the project? Irune, you were involved in it from the very beginning, obviously. Can you tell me a little bit about how this idea was developed initially?
Yeah, so I've worked on this project from the very beginning with Ben, the writer-director, and I think it was basically something that we were both very interested in, the subject matter. Obviously, it hit a bit closer to home for Ben because he had lived in Syria and he studied Arabic and politics in the university. He also lived in Egypt and has a closer relationship with the Middle East in general as well. But we've both been interested in kind of identity and people's identity when they become a refugee or when they get that label on them. And a few years ago, we took a trip to the Sahrawi refugee camps in Algeria, and we spent some time there living with a family. And that's a refugee camp that was supposed to be temporary, but it's been there for over 40 years now. So it's almost in a strange way like a city, you know. And I think that stayed with us for a while after that. It was also, we were doing, working with an NGO and also working on that same theme around the identity of people and how being refugees and living in those refugee camps affects their identity. And yeah, after that, obviously, when everything started to happen in Syria and with all the asylum seekers arriving in Europe and other parts of the world, we just kind of started to look at that, and especially Ben as well, just wanting to do something with that, but in the beginning not quite knowing how to approach such a sensitive subject matter.
How long was the development process then?
It took a while. We started in 2016 actually, and didn't shoot until 2 years later. So 2 years in total from the very, very beginning. Obviously in that time there was a lot of research, and also the project evolved quite a lot. So what we had in the beginning is not what we have now, what LIMBO ended up being. But it was very important for us to get that right. And obviously we are not refugees, so that's not our experience. We don't have that experience. So it was just about talking to charities that do work with asylum seekers and refugees, and talking to people who had been through the asylum seeker process in the UK and in Scotland, and just making sure that was that we were as truthful as we could to the subject matter, and then from then on, obviously just making it fiction and making it into what LIMBO ended up being.
So it's a step up in terms of the scale and ambition for Caravan Pictures, which is your production company with Ben. Your first film was produced entirely independently. I mean, what was the transition like to a larger project? And I guess at this point we should probably talk to Angus as well about, you know, his involvement. First of all, Irune, would you like to just talk about the transition to a larger project?
Yeah, so we made Picadero just as we graduated from film school. So that was really just the two of us going, okay, we want to make a feature film. But obviously at that point, we had only made a handful of shorts in university, and we weren't known in the industry. We didn't have experience. So we kind of thought, let's just go and do it. You know, we found the resources and a little bit of money, and we just found a way to do it. So with a very, very small budget, we made Picadero. And it was a very different experience, obviously, from Limbo. It was also very difficult, but in different ways, in very different ways. And then we decided, well, we kind of aimed to premiere at San Sebastian. That was kind of our challenge. Let's see if we can premiere it at San Sebastian Film Festival, which we ended up doing. So I think that opened a lot of doors for us, because then the film went on to do really well in the festival circuit and got people's attention, and especially Ben as a writer-director. It opened doors for him. It put us on the radar, on people's radars, and there was interest from the industry to kind of know what we wanted to do next.
Okay. And Angus, at what point did you get involved in this project? Was there a script in place already?
Yeah, there was a script in place, and it seemed to me like Ben and Irune were pretty well down the road of being able to get the film made, not just have it in development, but actually make it. So I think they were looking for partners on the film who could help with, you know, what you asked about earlier, which is a transition from a self-financed, almost like homemade film experience to something that's a little bit bigger and just there's a lot more ground to cover. There's a lot more different types of work to be done than on the first film, where you can essentially control everything yourself and you keep it really tight. If you're going up the budget level a bit and resourcing the film in a different way, you need to cover a lot more ground. And it can be easier to do that if say, for the producer's part of that, if there's more than one of you, to be simple about it. And, you know, you can split some of the responsibilities up a little bit, or you can share it a bit. And, you know, I think that was pretty smart. I mean, in the films I've made, I've almost always worked with another producer. And I do think there can be too much to do on a film project for one person to handle all of it. So I think it's usually a pretty good thing to have at least one other person you can work with, if you can find the right people. But the main thing that, you know, that they got me involved with it was, you know, the three aspects of it, which we'd normally look at anyway, which is first and foremost the script. And I thought it was a great script. I was really surprised when I got it. I get sent material quite a lot, and I started reading that script, and I could tell right away the quality of the writing, very, very high. And there's a moment early on in the story when you've seen the film, so you know that the main character they do a little thing about holding their hands up to each other's faces, with the idea that, you know, you can tell what someone's thinking just by looking at their eyes. And, you know, I really started leaning into it at that point. I thought that's dead funny and interesting way, a little exchange between two people that can tell you so much. And that was a real hook for me after that. I sort of saw things in it for me personally. Not to say Ben or Irune would agree with this, but, you know, I sort of saw a bit of an echo of Bill Forsyth in it, but also Lynn Ramsey's work. When I used to read or see her early short films, they seemed to be not really about very much plot-wise, but it was all under the surface for the characters. And I felt this had a sort of combination of both of those things, which was, you know, the lightness of touch and the comedy. Bill Forsyth, there's an obvious reference back to him and Local Hero with the phone box, of course, but I thought it was a kind of type of comedy was there, along with genuine substance. that's worth making this film because it's about something. It's insightful, it tells you about people and helps you understand something better. So you combine the script with, you then look at the previous film, and there's a direct thread between them. So, okay, the person who made that definitely can make this. And then, do you think we would all get on? And I thought we probably would. So as long as those three things are aligned, then I was really, really interested. And they obviously had already got, concrete foundations laid with people like Film 4. So you're there with good partners right away.
So when you've got two producers who are coming together, you don't know each other before. How do you actually work out? How do you divide the producing duties? Is there a sort of organic way that it just sort of naturally falls, or did you have to sort of lay down sort of a structure initially?
Yeah, personally, I don't think we did. We never had a meeting like that. But Irune, would you?
Yeah, no, I think it felt very organic, actually. It kind of felt very natural from the beginning. I think we just kind of started working and it worked. Everything fell into place, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It was really sort of pretty straightforward in that way. And what I wanted, what I could see in it was that, Irune and Ben had a very good communication between them, and they both really understood the material, like in a way that I probably didn't have that access, or that the same level, depth of insight that they both had in it. So I think that Irune would have taken more of the lead actually in this, let's say, the creative side of it, of dealing with the director and dealing with the material. So I would say that was one area where I think we would say you would balance it a little bit. Irune did a lot more of that and was on the floor every day on the shoot with the director, looking at the monitor and talking to him about what was going on and all that sort of. I think Irune was a lot closer to that than I was.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, can you talk us through putting together the funding for the film? Were there any stumbling blocks along the way when you were putting together the funding?
Not really. I mean, I think it actually felt fairly seamless. The process was we had Creative Scotland on board from the very beginning, because they had been involved in Picadero as well. And we started developing with them from a very early stage. And then Film 4 came on board, also for development. So once it was a little further in development, they came on board. And then we started to have those conversations with BFI as well. And they came in for production. So we were, fully funded.
It was pretty straightforward, and people were already in. They wanted to do the film because of Picadero and because of the script. So we were then about, it was things like your tax credit component of the finance plan. Do we need a bond company involved? Those kind of little things had to be, those little wrinkles or those questions had to be answered or ironed out. But eventually, because of the level of budget we were at, it seemed to be that, I would say, all the partners actually wanted to solve any issues quickly and not make them problematic. I mean, I would say in a way that from the finance point of view, generally what you're trying to do is get as much money as possible towards the goal of how much you genuinely need to make the film. This one's slightly different, I think, in a way, because at the outset, if anything, I think potentially Ben's instinct would always have been to make the film for less money because of his, I think, very positive experience making his first film. they could see how you can do things. If you can make a movie successfully for the small amount they've done it for before and keep all that control of it, your artistic vision is secured, then why do you want to jeopardize that by throwing a lot more money at it when you think you've always got solutions for how to do things at a price? But then you have to read the script and go, okay, well, this is a bit different and it needs actually different resources to be able to allow you to do what you want to do. So that's why, you know, Irune and I had to sort of get involved in trying to probably get us, you know, get a little bit closer to what you would see as a conventional low budget British film or first movie type budget level.
Mm-hmm. Especially, I think, once we had decided where to shoot, because that became quite clear that it was going to come with its own challenges as well, in terms of budget as well as obviously logistics, etc. But
well, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, was there ever a, you know, did you ever consider shooting on the mainland? Because obviously, I guess that would have been a slightly easier option than actually shooting in the Outer Hebrides.
Yeah, we did. We tried to, you know, we did a few scouting trips. We went to this just west, east, north, south. We just went everywhere in Scotland, and we couldn't quite find that thing that Uist has, the remoteness and in its own way its charm. And Ben had been to Uist during the development of the script, so he went there for a few weeks to write a draft of the script. And that's how Uist first kind of became an option as the location of the film. So when we started to look for the locations, we were trying to find a Uist on the mainland, or a Uist on a more accessible island even. But it became clear that that wasn't gonna happen. We just couldn't get the right locations. And so we just went back to Uist to see it, you know, to make sure that that's actually where we want to do it. And also it was the first time for me going to Uist as well. At this point, Uist was only in Ben's head, you know, only he had been there. And we took a trip to Uist, and then it kind of became clear that was where the film had to take place. So then it was just a matter of convincing everyone that was the case and that we could do it. And to be honest, people were very supportive and on board, and no one actually kind of, you know, objected to it. It was easier to convince them than we thought it was going to be.
So I'm assuming there's not really much of a kind of a filmmaking infrastructure on Uist. So what did you have to do to bring the film there? How many people were you housing? Can you just talk a little bit through just the basic issues that the problems you had to solve to do this?
I mean, in terms of the location, yeah, it added a level of risk for the financiers because it was an actual island, or a very remote island, and it added costs. So those two things, we had to get over that with the financiers. And Ben did a presentation for them in London, going through the various location scouting visual packages we produced from, you know, as Irune said, from mainland parts of Scotland that were coastal, obviously, to get the island effect, but weren't actual islands. So we'd been, you know, Mullintyre and up to the northeast, and we'd been all over the place. And he was able to make the presentation, which was therefore a creative argument that what he'd seen on Uist and the visuals of that fitted the objective of his objectives for the film better than any of the other places. irrespective of whether it was on this island or not. But there was then this extra cost, and they had to buy into that. The extra cost and the extra risk involved because of the remoteness. Because you can't get to the Outer Hebrides without either flying there or getting a ferry. And both those types of transport to those islands are expensive and not always reliable, especially at the time of year we were going, which would be autumn into winter, full on winter. The ferries get cancelled. The planes don't go. So you don't want to be sitting there with your crew of 200 people or 100 people, whatever. I can't remember the exact total, but a large amount of people with nothing to do because the actress is stuck in Glasgow. So, but the creative argument did win in the end, rightly. But yeah, we had to hire every single bit of accommodation that was available on the island, because not only does it obviously not have an infrastructure for TV and filmmaking, it doesn't have much infrastructure at all. It doesn't have big hotels. It doesn't have, a big tourist industry. It's a fringe tourist industry. Like, people will go there who are a bit adventurous, but it's well off the beaten track. It's a mile beyond the end of the beaten track. So we had to bring absolutely everything with us. So the whole circus had to be brought on the ferries mostly. So all our own catering and construction people and materials and everything, and everything had to be brought in. Absolutely everything.
Yeah, and we were also trying to be mindful of obviously where we were going and trying not to invade the island. So we did keep the crew as small as we could. I think we were around 80, 90 in total people. And yeah, just trying to keep the trucks and the cars and all of that to the minimum, which still felt like a lot once we were there. But yeah, in that sense, one of the first things we had to do very early on was actually sit with the production assistant and go through every single available accommodation on the island to make sure we actually could house everyone. And in the end, we ended up doing it, but it was also through people who had their house maybe on Airbnb, but who knew someone who had a house that was empty, and maybe they would rent it to us. And so it was also kind of a bit of a, just digging and trying to find places that weren't necessarily available for people to rent, but people would be happy to rent them to us. And likewise with the transport as well, we use obviously ferries and the planes that go there are very tiny. They really don't fit that many people, and locals use the ferries and the planes all the time. So we just had to make sure that we were booking them in advance, and also not fully booking them because we didn't want to piss anyone off early on. So just to still have them available for the locals, but also we had to basically bring the crew and the cast into the island in stages, and same on the way out. And we were actually the first film to shoot on the island, the first feature film to fully shoot on the island. So yeah, the infrastructure wasn't there.
Yeah. So it's quite funny when the schedule was being drawn up for all the different locations, because we filmed across 3 or 4 different islands. So everyone was literally dotted across the whole archipelago. So some mornings you would literally have 5 minutes to travel to the location, and other mornings you had an hour, just depending on which location we were at, because we were all over the place with the shoot. And we were all over the place with the accommodation. You could get lucky. So a few days actually, I could walk to the location.
Yeah.
Other days I had an hour in a van. But yeah, you can't underestimate that really. It's all single track roads there. don't want to disrupt people's lives too much, and you couldn't. Sometimes we couldn't find enough hard standing, paved car parks to park all the vehicles. So they were all sort of strung out along the edge of a single track road, and I'm sure we definitely got noticed by the locals. I think they were quite curious. They weren't like hugely excited. Don't think they get hugely excited by anything. But I think it was a little bit of variety brought for a few weeks, and we spent quite a lot of money there, obviously. But on one of the islands in particular, we also had to be wary that scheduling wise, we couldn't shoot there on a Sunday because of the religious situation there, that they still observe the Sabbath quite strictly. So we didn't want to upset that from a sort of local cultural perspective.
As producers, you're responsible for the worst case scenario thinking around the project, aren't you? So I just wondered, I mean, you already mentioned the travel aspect, but are there any other contingencies that you had to sort of have in place just in case something goes wrong?
I think the main ones were about travel and the weather. Those were the two things that could have made the shoot very, very difficult. That sometimes they did make the shoot very difficult, but I think in terms of the travel, I think we were quite lucky because it was, I think we organized it quite well, if I may say so, with obviously Wendy, our line producer. She did a great job as well, and we made sure that everyone was going to be on the island a day before they were needed. So it was giving us a bit of a space, if the ferry or the plane was cancelled. Then, for example, some members of the cast stayed on the island for the whole shoot, even though they were only needed for 2 or 3 days a week, or depending on the week, maybe sometimes 1 day, maybe sometimes 2, but they agreed that especially for the 4 main characters, that they would stay on the island for the whole duration. And that was great, obviously, being able to have them there. And in terms of the weather, yeah, I mean, we did have to stop shooting a couple of days because it was, in the best of times, it was difficult and challenging and really, really hard to just stand in that wind and rain for 10 plus hours every day. And I mean, the crew were amazing standing that as well. And then sometimes it just became too crazy or too windy, or we had rain, we had suddenly 5 minutes later it was sunny, and then it was hailing, and then so that was, I think in terms of scheduling, that was something that was the main challenge, and it actually didn't affect us as much as it could have. I think we were quite lucky, but we did have to actually go back for after the main shoot. We had to go back for a couple of days because of a couple of scenes we had to drop because of the weather. It just became so windy that we were shooting this scene with small children, and we were just worried that the wind was just gonna take them away. Like, it was literally so windy. And then obviously to make sure that all the crew could drive safely, and the cast just drive safely back to the accommodation, because as Angus said, it's a chain of islands and they are linked with bridges, but the sea actually comes quite high on those bridges, and when it's windy can go over the bridge as well. So there were just like lots of elements to kind of take into account. Yeah.
With all that in mind, is there anything that you would do differently if you went back and had to do it again?
I think maybe just if we had the resources, add a few days to the schedule, probably it would have made everyone's life a bit easier. I think we didn't quite realize, because some of the weeks were 6-day weeks, and we didn't realize how exhausting that was when you are exposed to the elements in the ways that we were, and how much we all needed the weekend to kind of rest and recharge the energy.
Can I ask, was Screen Scotland involved, and if so, how were they involved?
Yeah, Screen Scotland were involved from the beginning, so we developed the project with them, and they supported us throughout development, throughout production as well. And yeah, they are really great. They've just given us, they were very helpful as well with the locations, actually. They were really great at kind of recommending people that could be good as consultants, and also to recommend areas that could fit. Obviously, they have like a really great database and knowledge, and we use them quite a bit for that as well. Yeah, but yeah, they've been a great support from very early development all the way through production and still even now.
And beyond. And I think, you know, as Irune says, before I was involved, they had already got money from the very earliest sort of seed program that Screen Scotland ran at that time through SFTN, the Scottish Film Talent Network. So you could say they were the first people to really get on board the fact that Picadero had done so well outside of the UK and had this profile for these new filmmakers, and Creative Scotland were the first people to recognise it, jump on it, and give them some money to do their next project. And you know, that quickly transitioned up to, you know, getting further development money out of Film 4. So I think they were instrumental in getting it moving and doing that important thing, which is to be the first fellow traveller, the first believer in it. That helps other people to think they should believe in it as well. And you know, as Irune says, they've followed that up right through the whole production into, you know, even the distribution of it. They're trying to help out as much as they can with that and promoting the film and all that. So I think they've been really good.
Let's talk a bit about casting, because I mean, really, they are phenomenal. The core cast are absolutely brilliant. How long did it take you to find the right people for the roles?
I think some characters were easier than others to cast. So, for example, with Omar, with Amir, I think as soon as we had him in front of us in the audition room, we knew it was him. It was just this thing where you just know. He was so amazing when he did that audition, and it became instantly clear that he was Omar. And then, for example, with Farhad, that took a bit more time, but it wasn't necessarily because we couldn't find the right person, because we actually found Vikash quite early on. But it was more to do with the fact that I think the character needed to be found. It was maybe a slightly more a character that maybe could be open to interpretation a bit more. The way, you know, because some of his lines are very, very funny, but he always says them in quite a straight way. He's not trying to play on the comedy of things. So it was kind of just like, I think the audition process with Vikash worked almost a little bit like a rehearsal process where we all slowly found his character. And I think it was actually really good. I'm not sure if he would agree because obviously he had to come in quite a few times and he didn't quite know if he had the role or not. But he was also amazing, really, really good. And then with Kwabena and Ola, I think we quite early on we also knew that it was going to be them, but we had individual casting sessions, and then we paired them up, so the different kind of options to check the chemistry between them as well. And once we put them together, it became pretty clear that the chemistry between the two of them was great. I think in general, the casting was something that we were trying to be as truthful as possible to the characters. And we initially tried to find main actor. So for Omar's character, we tried to find an actor from Syria because the character is from Syria. But it was just so, it was kind of just like getting the balance right of being truthful to who the character in the film is, but also we needed an actor. Omar's character carries so much, and we just needed someone who was going to be able to give us what we needed for that character, you know. I don't think it's an easy role to play. And in the end, it had to come down to the best actor for the role. Which is how we ended up finding Amir. And then with the other characters, it was something similar as well. But for example, for the two brothers, we had a bit of flexibility on the background, so we just ended up adapting that to the actors rather than have them play something else. We also worked with real refugees in the film, and for some of the smaller characters and some of the extras. So that's also where charities helped us find them, and we just kind of flew them all up to Houston, and I think they had a good time, hopefully, and I think they found the experience very like fun and funny, and maybe slightly boring as well, because I think people think that shooting is a lot of fun, but then they arrive there and they realize actually it's a lot of waiting. And then for some of the locals as well, we had real locals from US. They were the extras as well.
Can you also, I mean, a key part of the film is the fact there's a chicken in a lot of it, a lot of the scenes. What are the challenges of working with, a bird? You obviously can't really train them particularly well. Were there any kind of issues raised with having to deal with a chicken?
I think the chicken was actually really good. He was a very calm chicken. I mean, I don't know if Pikachu would agree, because obviously he's the one that worked closest to him. But yeah, would you say, Angus?
That chicken gave us no trouble at all. It was amazing. I wouldn't have expected it, but we were never waiting for the chicken. The chicken was always on time, well behaved. It didn't ask for too much. In fact, I'm pretty sure we had 3 of them, and one of them was quite bad-tempered.
Yeah.
And there was one of them which fell asleep all the time. So there was a couple of times when we actually had to sort of wake it up to get the scene going. But generally, no, seriously, I was amazed. We had an animal handler, obviously, and the chicken was amazing. It was really like no trouble at all.
Even in that scene where he's supposed to fall asleep, and I think it was just like 1 or 2 takes. He would, it was a few takes, but not because of him. He would just place him there, and he would just fall asleep. And then, I think it was more from our side, just making sure that he wasn't freezing when we were outside and things like that, looking after him. But he was amazing.
But that's another thing where, you're talking about the organization of it. To do that scene, you have to get the animal handler to come from central Scotland in her van with the chickens for a certain day, and it takes her a whole day to get there. You know, if you're going to hold her up, then you basically got a day either side of her work. And for some people, like just to expand that a little bit, the company who did our snow effects, yes, it wasn't real snow. They were 2 days traveling to get to the job. They had to drive up from London, and you know that's one of the areas where you're adding all the expense. You have to convince the financiers about that sort of, you know, let's say at least extra day, a couple of days on some people's budget is you're getting enough out of the location to justify that.
Irune, you and Ben have been named as BAFTA Breakthrough Talents. What impact does that have on you? Has it had on you in Caravan Pictures so far? I mean, it's fairly recent, isn't it?
Yeah, it is fairly recent. But I mean, it's great. Obviously, like we've known of BAFTA Breakthrough for, I think, since the very beginning. And being part of it, it just feels like this kind of stamp of approval almost that we do belong in this industry, which is great. I think so far the area where we've noticed the most is the visibility that is given us, and yeah, it just feels like we are slowly kind of taking steps into the industry a little bit, and we have a year of it ahead of us. So we're just obviously in this weird year with coronavirus and everything, we've not been able to have the normal events that we would have had with them by now. But yeah, we are just looking forward to everything that they have in store for us.
I just wanted to also ask you, I mean, you're Spanish and Ben is Scottish, your company is kind of a European collaboration. What are your thoughts on the UK industry going forward in a post-Brexit landscape? I know it's a kind of depressing question, but I mean, what do you anticipate? Are you optimistic?
It's a tricky, it's a difficult question, because I think there is not a lot of information in terms of exactly what Brexit means, other than obviously not having access to certain funding and things like that. But we are still hoping that that won't affect us too much. So we are based in Edinburgh, we are based in Scotland, and so is our company as well. So we'll keep making films in the UK, if we can at least. But we are also very interested, and especially, as you said, being from Spain, I'm very interested in co-productions. So I think we are just gonna try and keep doing what we've been doing, and just see how we can do it, even if it's in a different way. I'm sure there will be ways of doing it. So I think filmmaking and producing so often is just about solving problems. That this is probably another problem we'll have to solve.
Yeah. Angus, what are your thoughts on that?
Working on this film has given me a bit of an insight into, more of an insight into the, let's say, the true independent European or world cinema, even world. I think a lot of times in the UK, it's easy to be quite insular or to be looking westwards towards the US. But I think with, you know, what Picadero did and what this film has already done is, you know, just to show that a British independent film can be part of that sort of, let's say, European filmmaker soup. And it's been good to see that that we're not just trying to be driven by, you know, television money or trying to get US money, that there's a world out there that's interested in our stories, that are European stories. And I think the, you know, the caravan cinemas is that writ large, or in reality, in, you know, flesh and blood, it's genuinely Spain and Britain, or Spain and Scotland working together. And I think there is a world view there that's different. That's, if you want to call it more like auteur cinema, maybe you can, but it's definitely director driven. And you know, it's been really good to get an insight into that through, you know, through what's happened with this film. And, you know, to see something like, you know, a big ambition, which is, you know, for Ben to be saying from the very outset, I think from maybe even the first time we met, when I was asking about what are the objectives for this film, he said, I wanted to be in Cannes. But you know, British films don't get into Cannes. That's not what happens. It doesn't happen. And he said, no, well, I would really like to be in, have the film in the Cannes Film Festival. And he did it. It was achieved. That, you know, that box was ticked. So I think that's, you know, that's a brilliant achievement. But it's part of something that was planned and thought about, and is, you know, is genuinely properly won.
I've got one final question. I think we're running out of time a little bit, but I just wanted to ask about the decision to donate a percentage of the cash prizes that you got for Limbo to charities, which I think is an incredible thing to do. And I'm really so impressed that you've done it. But can you just talk a little bit about that, Irune?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it kind of just makes sense, you know, it's just it just felt like it was the natural thing to do. We are making a film that we are hoping will make people think and will just change people's perspective on how they view refugees and asylum seekers, and try hopefully help people see the person behind, or the people behind the numbers. And I think there are charities that are doing amazing work with different asylum seekers and refugees that arrive in Scotland or the UK or different parts of the world. And I think that just being able to donate that money is just trying to, I guess, help the change that we are also, you know, in one way making the film, and trying to open up people's perspectives. And then on the other hand, we are also trying to help these charities that are the ones that actually do their work, the hard work on the ground. And we also had a few charities that helped us through the development process when we were doing the research. You know, they connected us with asylum seekers in the UK and refugees, and we're really grateful to them. And they do this because, you know, they care about this and they are passionate about it. And I think that if we can offer any help in this case, you know, in the form of money, then yeah, we just have to do it.
Wow. And well done. I mean, well done on the film. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and well done on actually putting, you know, your heart out there and doing some good for the world.
Thank you.